Well, thank you and welcome everyone to our first webinar of the year, first meeting for 2022 Asian American Chamber of Commerce. My name is Reena Bhatia. I am the chair of the GovCon committee at Asian American Chamber of Commerce. If you're a company that does business with the government, please consider joining us and being part of our GovCon committee, where we bring awesome programming, networking, tons of benefits that we'll talk about when you join AACC. Next slide, please. Our board of directors or board members at the chamber, we have an awesome group, quite a mixed group of commercial and government executives. And these are all the people that you get to network with. I'm biased. I think our GovCon committee is the best. So. Membership benefits of AACC, obviously through these different programs that we put together, you get educational content. Networking is a huge thing for us, and there's a lot of networking that happens between members. Teaming opportunities for GovCon companies that happen amongst members. There's also visibility for your company across the community, not just for Asian businesses, but all member businesses. You get visibility across because the chamber works hard to get you profiled, to get you spotlighted through our different social media and monthly meetings. So there are lots of benefits for you to joining the chamber, and so we encourage you to become a member. Our various chamber sponsors that we'd like to thank. Every year, these companies come back and sponsor us. Some of them are new to us. We thank you all for your sponsorships. All right, getting to the meat of today's topic. It's a three-part webinar series. It's future of work. We are starting with what is right now a huge topic of conversation in the news. Part one is the Great Resignation. Our moderator today is Balaji Venkatesan. I hope I said your name correctly. He's a founder and CEO of SD Solutions. Our panelists are Talamar Anderson, founder and CEO of Boss Actions LLC, and Serene Singh, from a corporate trainer director for Serene Private Limited out in Singapore. So she's joining us in the middle of her night. Thank you, Serene, for doing that. And thank you, Talamar, for joining us as well. Balaji, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then the panelists. Handing it over to you.
Thank you, Reena. My name is Balaji Venkatesan. I'm the founder and CEO of SD Solutions. We've been in the government contracting business for 11 years, and we have been supporting almost 15 different federal agencies in the United States in various different capabilities: cybersecurity, IT modernization, professional services, management consulting, and SD Solutions is also, proud recipient of Small Business Small Business Prime Contractor of the Year from U.S. Department of Treasury, nominated by Uncle Sam Internal Revenue Service. So we are very delighted to be part of this GovCon group at Asian American Chamber of Commerce. And like Rima said, if you are in that business, please consider joining us. So there's a lot of opportunities to, grow, network, and, expand your services and products. With that being said, on today's topic, Great Resignation has been a buzzword going around for the last year and a half. In many parts of the world, especially in the United States. What does it mean, right? I mean, fundamentally, it's employees quitting voluntarily from their job. And then, there are various reasons, a lot of impacts, a lot of lessons. Today, we have a lot of, interesting items to discuss. What have we learned so far? What does it actually mean? Who does it impact, and what kind of impacts do we have, and what can some of the leaderships in the both government and the commercial space can do about it? So with that being said, we have two panelists today. We'll start off with Talmar Anderson with our first question of the day. Talmar, what do you make of this Great Resignation? Can you, for our members who joined today, can you provide some spotlight on what the issue is and what have you seen so far?
Absolutely. Thanks again, Balaji, and thank you to the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. Thrilled to be a part of this panel with Serene. The Great Resignation is this movement, for lack of a better way to collectively discuss it, of employees who have decided that they want to take more control of the way that they live their lives, and specifically by being more particular with the way they work and who they work for and what that's going to look like. And so the Great Resignation is this larger than regular set of numbers of employees that are just resigning to leave for a better way of life, as opposed to the usual attrition, which was, a conflict with an employer or a personal change. These are more people choosing to make a life choice through leaving their current employment.
Thank you. So now let's switch to Serene. Can you talk about what you see, what you have seen so far, and then we can, slowly jump into from global and US perspectives and, between large and medium and unregulated, I guess, workforce. What have you seen?
Of course, I'm muted. Yes. No, once every webinar, I must do this. Yes. So like I said, thank you, Balaji, and also like Thomas said, thank you to this chamber as well for giving us this opportunity to speak. I think that I am quite happy to be doing this today, because yesterday the US labor statistics was just released for November of last year. And the US has an all-time high on private employees resigning. And it's now 4.3 million, which is 3.4% of the workforce. To give you an idea, before February of last year, the US has for the last 20 years never exceeded 2.4%. And then after that, of course, you exceeded. And from April all the way, it appears, until November, with the exception of October, it went down a little bit. It was consistently breaking all-time highs in terms of the number of resignation. I mean, it went high, it stayed high. And just from the latest stats, it seems like 2022 will continue to be another year of Great Resignation. So that's that's something that is unusual enough to have its own name, to have its own phenomenal name. And as you have said, I think there is quite a few different aspects to it. And we can go into it a little bit more in terms of like all the different geographical areas and so forth.
While I have you, Serene, can you talk about, I'm going to switch to Talmar after this, but at a high level, what do you see from global? I mean, is this happening in, let's say, United Kingdom or Germany or some other parts of the world, like Singapore, some Asian countries, or US, or which do you see like, this is happening more or less or none? And also, from your point of view, what have you seen so far between like large scale employers, like, for example, Walmart or Amazon, or, some within the large scale, I would say even Microsoft, things of that nature, or a small business like a local restaurant, a salon, or beauty shop. What's your thoughts on what you have seen so far?
Yes, the US is blessed with very in-depth statistics that's being produced by the Department of Statistics. Elsewhere, what we are seeing are more like surveys that is being done by companies. So to give you two really significant ones, Microsoft did a survey globally of 50,000 people, and 41% is considering quitting. A HR software from UK, Persino, did a similar kind of survey. 38% is considering quitting. These are all global surveys. And I will say that, yes, the problem is global. Of the global, probably US is spotlighted, A, because we have the data, and two, because it appears that you guys are suffering it from a much higher level. So in Europe, we see it happening in Germany a lot. France, Italy, Spain, interestingly, resignations have gone down and not up, probably because unemployment is like 15% there. And in many parts of Asia, we also see survey type or anecdotal type information that says, there are people quitting. So a local news media has done a survey of like 5,000 people across Asia. And of that, roughly about half of them are thinking of quitting. In China, I'm not sure you guys have heard about the phenomenon of tangping, which is younger, or actually lots of Chinese workers deciding that they would rather take a low consumerism, low demand job or lifestyle, just to, it's like almost, they don't in the sense kind of resign, they opt out of full-time jobs. They may take odd jobs, part-time jobs, consume very little, spend very little, and essentially spend their time at home or connected online, and living a very low demand lifestyle. Okay. So across, these are phenomena that have all come up just in this last year alone. And a survey, a breakdown of the data based again on survey results have shown that two groups in particular are disproportionately represented. The first is mid-level employees. So that's a lot of them are mid-level. Am I? Okay, I don't know why I keep being muted back again, but oh yes, so I'm going to blame the computer and the internet for this. Okay, yes, it's definitely not my fault. But anyway, no, I wanted to say that the two things, right? Harvard did a survey to analyze all the results coming from different surveys, and they found that mid-level employees are disproportionately represented, and people in the IT and healthcare industries are disproportionately represented. So later on, we'll talk a little bit about why these two groups in particular, but that's what's been happening. So on a larger level, I will say that I will venture to guess that it affects large companies, corporations, governments, nonprofit organizations, and small businesses equally. Although, to be very frank, we have the data from large organizations, but we don't have the data from small businesses. And so, but anecdotally, I believe that it is fairly widespread.
Thank you, Serene. Kalmar, your thoughts?
Well, specifically, I think that one of the things we should recognize is, again, to the data, it looks like the US is being more significantly impacted by the Great Resignation. I know that Serene has spoken on that in the past, and I'm sure she'll have more to share on that later during this talk. But while it may be equal in percentage points with regard to how the Great Resignation is affecting large corporations to smaller business, I would say that small business is being exponentially impacted by the concept that people can choose to change their lifestyle. I think it's an excellent and outstanding perspective to look at the idea that in that decision to leave an employer, not just because perhaps the communication is bad or they feel underappreciated, or even that they feel that they could get a higher salary, because there's, in this Great Resignation, there have been some industries that have become very, very competitive with how compensation is being modeled for some of the really high demand positions. However, the majority of the resignations look to be about the lifestyle choice, and to the idea that Serene suggested about opting out of the high demand, high achieving positions, that there is a definite, whether it's age specific in the US or not, I don't have any data on that, but there was a real reckoning that came with the pandemic that allowed people to say, you know what, I'm okay not going out as often. I'm okay not having a fancy car. In fact, we can sell one of our cars because we're not driving as much. And so people really had that ideology shift of how they wanted their life to be. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? It is a computer, Serene. You guys saw my hands up here. I'm not touching anything. Sorry about that. But so there has been that ideological shift about the employer is a part of my life. And with that, the demands of that employment, whatever the industry and the sense of high intensity or encompassing parts of your life, have definitely, people have said, I think I can choose or not choose to have that. And maybe I'm okay with a less demanding job, whether that turns into a part-time position, a remote position, a position that requires less time and energy beyond the actual hours required by an employer, less management interest, less, trying to move through the ranks kind of motivation. That's definitely something that's out there. What I haven't seen change is the motivation beyond wanting increasing compensation on the whole, right? There are some people that have families that can afford, they have one person that's creating enough of a salary that the second person that's contributing to that family can do less. But on the whole, people are wanting more money for doing less. And it's about whether or not employers and companies can afford to do that. Some corporations might be able to, but the small business, it's going to be really hard for them to compete on that financial side. So I'm encouraging them to really compete on the lifestyle and the flexibility with which you can create your workflows and your labor force.
Okay. Thank you, Talmar. I think you touched upon some of the aspects of what I was going to ask next. But before I ask my next question, I just want to make an announcement to everybody who's on the call that this is, we want this to be interactive. It doesn't mean that I get to ask all the questions and the panelists are going to, answer the questions that I'm asking. But if you have any thoughts that you want to share, or if you want to ask any questions from the panelists, please feel free to, type your questions on the chat window. I'll do my best to, keep an eye on the chat window to pick up any of your questions, and then I can ask them as well. So I just wanted to put it out there so nobody feels like this is, three people talking kind of a session, right? It's designed to be more interactive. So I encourage you guys to, just put your thoughts, ask your questions as you come across those. But going, back to, yes.
Sorry, this is Rena. I also want to interrupt and let our audience know. Feel free to network with each other and share your contact information in the chat box.
Absolutely.
This is about networking. It is important. So don't feel like it's questions or nothing. Questions and your contact information for networking. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's a good point, Rena. Thank you for that. So, I mean, now we talked about what great resignations mean and, some backgrounds between different aspects of, global versus United States and large, medium. So I would like to discuss some of the reasons that we know so far. Obviously, I don't believe there has been a full-fledged research out there that listed all the different aspects of why people are quitting. But I think based on what's happening for the last year and a half, we have a pretty decent idea behind, why people are quitting. So I would like to start with you, Serene. What are your thoughts on why people are, why this phenomenon is happening?
So I think that one of the great clues is the fact that IT and healthcare is where people are quitting from. And if you think about both IT and healthcare over the course of the last 2 years, those are the two industries that have sort of taken on the most in terms of work and pressure as compared to any other industry. And so I think that one of the biggest reasons people are quitting is simply because they are burnt out. I mean, they're quitting for their mental health. And this is also supported by the fact that you see what happens is in most normal circumstances, people quit when prospects are good. So when unemployment is low, when there's a lot of jobs and very low unemployment, people have a tendency to quit. But if the reverse, like for example, the Great Depression in US actually knocked the whole 1 percentage point off the quit rate because there weren't so many jobs, people didn't dare to quit. What has happened in the States is last year, unemployment hit above 14% at one point early in the year. And yet that was immediately followed by the Great Resignation, right, within 2 months. So if you think of that, it tells me that people are quitting because they have no choice, right? They are quitting because either they are burnt out and they can't carry on anymore, or they are facing severe work-life conflict and they are no longer able to both work from home and school their kids from home. And one of the evidence of this is that women are quitting and not rejoining the workforce anymore. So I'll talk a little bit about this rejoining, not rejoining thing. But they estimate something like between 2 to 4 million women have left the US workforce over the course of last year and not gone back. So that, I think, points to a work-life conflict because women disproportionately take on the work at home. Now, the third reason is this, which also something that we are seeing, that people are reconfiguring their careers. In other words, like the Tangping movement in China, they are not just quitting, they are quitting and re-evaluating what career means to them. Does it mean taking a couple of odd jobs so that I can feed myself, but not, but taking care of my psychological health and not putting out with all these like ridiculous work hours, ridiculous work conditions that damage me in the long term. So people are reconfiguring careers. Gig work has gone up phenomenally. Part-time work has gone up. People have started businesses, especially a lot of it online businesses. So all of that has gone up. And that means that actually people are not just quitting, but people are opting out of the traditional corporate careers to look at other forms of work. So I would say probably those are the 3 big reasons.
Thank you, Serene. And Talmar, your thoughts on the reasons for why this is happening?
Well, so I second everything Serene says always because she's brilliant. But I would also say that the pandemic really, when the world was forced to shut down in some extraordinary, literally people never believed that could happen situation, it wasn't just a burnout situation. The realization of what life could be if they made different choices came about. And so within that, we've combined that with the rise in people who are being told that you can start a business and you can work from yourself and you can work from home. And so there's this concept out there that, well, I don't have to do it the way, that our fathers and our grandfathers did so long ago. I don't have to work for the same company for 20 years. And that's something that has already been out of the socioeconomic ideology in US anyway. People don't stay with companies longer than just about 18 to 36 months and a little bit longer if they're management, but there's already a change in how long in the tenure someone stays. So if we know that we can, that we are likely to be able to choose to leave a job and still get another job when we're ready, that already takes one pressure point off. I don't have to worry, there will be another job. But then there's this other idea that I could build my way of bringing compensation into my home in a different way. And whether it's true or not, people believe that they can start a business very easily and they can find a way. And again, whether that's through the gig economy, you know, the side hustle economy, whatever we want to call it, where we're taking smaller types of roles and we're using that just to keep the cash coming. It's allowing people to make different kinds of choices. And if stress and that pressure of the boss saying, you know, what do you mean you're not going to answer my calls at 8 p.m.? And what do you mean you're not going to work weekends? People are opting out of that. They want to be able to spend time with their family. They want to be able to sit by a tree and read a book, you know, whatever that thing is that makes them feel like it's a full life outside of working. And if they can disassociate themselves from the title and the career, which is happening again more in our younger generations than our older, but even some of our older people care less about being able to point to, I did this thing for 20 solid years, and they don't carry that as a sense of pride anymore. Now you can, change your life and there's still an acknowledgement of your value and your contribution. And so that's letting people make more choices and define exactly what they want to get from an employer. And that's where it's really making it hard for the small business owners who are trying to attract these people, but they're kind of like, well, they all say they want to work when they want to work, but my clients need what they need, right? And it's walking that fine line of building a world that supports this new definition of what a full life, including your work, could look like, as well as supporting the fact that there's plenty of businesses that have people lined up out the door to get their services and their products the way they want them when they want them, right? The consumer and the societal ideology of I want what I want when I want it still requires workers to be behind the scenes getting that done. And the employers feel the pressure to fulfill that immediate need of, long hours being open and being around, but the employees are saying, but I don't want to do that. So it's a definite reckoning right now. And I think that the corporations and the small businesses that can be very, very proactive about allowing that their workforce is going to be structured differently. The way that they are available to their clients will be structured differently. And the people that really innovate there fastest are really going to have the opportunity, when they can find that alignment of our employees want this and our clients want this, and this is how we can bring the two together to get everybody satisfied. The companies that can find that line faster are the ones that are going to really pull out of this with a team that they're going to love and that will love being there. And that in and of itself just brings more performance and profitability and a great culture. So there's a real opportunity here, but it's not an easy one.
Okay, thank you. So one thing, I probably wear hat of a panelist instead of a moderator for 1 minute, if you allow me. One reason I've seen in the industry that I am in, we are a hub zone business. For people who do not know what that means, it's historically underutilized business. So we need to have certain percentage of our workforce from economically backward places. Typically, those workers not directly support your products or services. They do administrative work. So traditionally, those are kind of low wage work, right? So one thing we have seen in our industry is that after the pandemic started, as part of the relief measures, the government was, some leaders were saying, let's pay people to stay at home so we can, slow the spread or, whatever to handle the pandemic. Let's make sure they're not stressed out about their rent. We'll pay them some kind of a check and whatnot and increase unemployment benefits for, extended period of time. So certain part, I'm not generalizing, but certain part of the low wage population, it kind of made no sense for them to work when they got the kind of, checks and the kind of welfare, efforts that the government was providing. So one part of that workforce, again, is not coming back to the, workforce again to start working. So that's a challenge that we have seen. Again, it's anecdotal, But if you talk to people who have workforce in the low wage areas, it's a struggle for them to, find people. So with that, I'll switch my hat back into a moderator. Uh, One thing I wanted to kind of talk about is, yes, this is a primarily a labor or workforce related phenomenon. People quitting en masse voluntarily for whatever reason, but that phenomenon has, it has ripple effects, right? It affects different parts of our life. You call it economic primarily, but it also has certain impacts, culturally. I think Serene talked about it to some degree, where parents who did not find, I guess, daycare or school support, they had to kind of quit their job to be the educator in addition to a parent for their children. And there are some health aspects also for people, different mental health aspects and social aspects of this great resignation. So if you were to, like, within 2 minutes summarize the social, economic, cultural, or health aspects of great resignation, I would like to hear your thoughts. Talmar, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. One of the main pieces that have affect, to your point, of the people that have not come back, is the inconsistencies with the school systems being available. Our society is so fundamentally built on the idea that our children have a place to go, to be taken care of. They'll be safe, they'll be fed, they'll be educated. That's nice too, but really having that piece pulled out from so many employees was devastating. And the truth is that not all the systems are back in place, and in fact are being played with in political different ways, as seen in different cities across the US right now. So it's really hard for someone to go back to an employer or to find new employment and say, I really want to work with you. I'm excited that we've come together and we all agree this is a great fit. However, just be mindful, if my school system says that they're not coming in at 11 p.m. tomorrow, I can't come in, right? I've got 2 kids or 3 kids, however many kids I have at home, and they all of a sudden they have a responsibility to make sure those kids are cared for. And so that devastation of pulling that infrastructure out, not having a place for those kids to go to be safe and taken care of, to allow parents and family units to go out and create the income that they needed, it was devastating. And so a lot of people lost jobs. A lot of small business went out of business. And so some of those jobs aren't there for people to go back to. That's a big part of it. Oftentimes the caregiver in a family is a person who doesn't have the full time. They might be the secondary income. And so when they had to leave to stay home with the kids, they lost the job, but maybe those companies, a lot of them didn't survive. So there's no job to go back to. So they're staying in that caregiver role. So it has been, I think it's very underestimated, the amount of damage that has been done by creating this so dependent upon infrastructure piece of schools to be taken out for all these different reasons. And it's sure, it's devastating to the kids and their education. I'm not even discussing that right now. This is about the infrastructure of a family unit being able to tell an employer, I can be there dependably. They can't, because what they need is the school system to be there dependably. And that's something that we never thought we'd ever have to question, has been in question for 2 years and is still being played with now. So that's really hard for people to put themselves out there in a situation and promise to do a great job for an employer when they can't, because they don't know if they've got to be home.
Thank you. And Serene, again, social, mental health, economic, cultural impacts of what's happening. That's one thing I will tell you, right? Anecdotal example I would say is, some kids in my kids' school, they get 2 meals in a day only when they go to school, right? And with the great resignation, with so many things shut down, that had economic impact on the parents, right? So I'll stop there, but over to you to talk about social, economic, cultural, or health impacts of Great Resignation. I mean, we've talked about people have a choice now. They not only are quitting, they are scaling back, and they are, starting businesses, all that. But there's also a downside to it, I would think, right? Anything that happens, there's always there's equilibrium, right? There's positive aspects, there's negative aspects. So some of the impacts that you have seen, either through published reports, official reports, or the things that you have seen in your industry.
So what we know right now in terms of the impact of this Great Resignation is twofold. One is that there is a huge labor shortage in the precise type of people that we are needing to solve a very complex problem. So right now, the amount of changes and upheavals that have gone on in the last 2 years, just give you one example. We are now literally living in the work of the future, because we have digitized the equivalent of 8 to 10 years within the first year of COVID. So what we are living in now is the technology and the type of work that we have been experiencing in 2030. And if you look at that and you ask yourself, what do we do then? How should business go forward? How do we solve our customers' problems? What problems do our customers have? These are very complex problems that require a lot of experience. But it is the mid-level people, the operational leaders, the middle managers who usually do the sense making in an organization, who are quitting in droves. And the biggest impact right now for companies is that they are losing the people who know or who have a hope in chance. I mean, like a hope of actually making sense of what's happening. And therefore, companies are floundering because they have no idea what to do. They're losing all these almost the most useful parts of their organization. That's number one. The second impact is the relationship between employer and employee has changed. I speak to many Americans, and I will be very frank and tell you that the American work culture is puritanical to the point of workaholism. And as a result of that, a lot of the times employees are being asked to sacrifice everything else in their life, their families, their health, their social life, their community, just for their work. That will not happen anymore. Because across America, employees are basically saying, we're not taking that deal anymore. We are walking from the table. And so we are already seeing it now. 87% of employees surveyed say that they want to work from home at least once a day. Oh, at least once a week, I apologize. And that is something that employees will never come back from. There are many, many other kind of deals that employers have always taken for granted that I truly believe they will never come back from again. So asking employees to work an unreasonable amount of time, asking them to sacrifice their families, sacrifice their health and safety for their work, that's not coming back anymore. And on top of it, a lot of the polarization, the racism, just even the Black Lives Matters movement and so on, there is a lot of protest. I mean, this is nothing that there's nothing brought about by the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, people are re-examining their values in life. And because they are re-examining, all of this thing is going to float out. And employers going forward who are racist, who are sexist, who are no longer respectful of their employees, my gut feel is they're not going to survive.
Okay, thank you. So one other question I was going to ask, now that we have seen this Great Resignation happening for a year and a half, and like you said, even yesterday, Department of Labor, LinkedIn had a very special report about Great Resignation, very timely, right? before this session. It's been happening for over a year now, and a lot of things that we have learned, obviously. So let's say, this is a typical Monday morning quarterback question, right? If we know what we know today, back in the day when the Great Resignation started to happen, what are the things that we could have done as business owners or as legislators, lawmakers, or people who have some kind of authority in decision making to a certain degree to alter some of this? What are the things that we could have done to alter, change, minimize, maximize some of these impacts that we talked about? I'll go with you, Serene, first.
I think one of the things nobody realized in the beginning of 2020 is how long COVID was going to be. Here in Singapore, we survived SARS. SARS was like a couple of months. And the presumption was, oh, this is going to be a couple of months. So because we didn't have that kind of foresight, we weren't preparing our workers to work under substantial mental pressure, physical health threat, anxiety, general psychological fear, grief for 2 years and counting, right? This could be a 5-year thing, 10-year thing, who knows? And so if we at that time had realized how long it was going to be, I think one of the few things that employers could have done is employers can prioritize the mental health and mental state of their employees. That was the first. The second is you can probably re-examine your own actions in 2020 and perhaps even in 2021. You will find that you were doing a lot of spinning around in circles, trying to solve problems when you had no idea what's going to happen next week. And then the conditions change and all your decisions last week was useless for this week. I think there was a lot of trying to do something when we are in a situation where nothing useful can be done. So actually cutting back and acknowledging that, hey, we don't know what's happening. We are unable to make a rational response at this point. And just sitting with the employees and going like, look, we're trying our best. We are responding to it as we come. I think a lot of that would have been helpful. And the third big one is literally, the assumption is work from home, work from office. I mean, it's just a change of place. Not true. There is an enormous impact of working from home that has not been fully acknowledged at the beginning. Things like, very simply, how do I manage my kids' schooling while I'm trying to be on a Zoom meeting with a client? What do I do if one of my family members is down from COVID and quarantined in the next bedroom, right? Because the hospitals are full. So none of those issues were ever addressed. And I think if we had been more aware and addressed those at the beginning of the pandemic, I don't think after a year we'll be seeing this almost protest by voting with their feet that employees are doing right now.
Thank you, Serene. Talmar, what we could have done differently?
Absolutely.
What we know now.
Yeah, thanks, Balaji. I would tell you, one of the things that I think my company at least got right, Boss Actions, we did, as soon as the first school day shut down, and I saw how it was going to be affecting both our clients and employers on the whole, because now all of a sudden, last minute, a bunch of employees weren't coming to work that day. We did create a masterclass on how to walk your employees through setting up a work environment at home, and how to help them structure days, and how to help them with this real fear and crisis situation, and how to really step into managing remotely. And of all the things, I think that we didn't, the whole business culture and employers as a whole did not really acknowledge nor set new process for managing remotely. And again, whether people are coming back or not, and companies are changing their labor force, I think that, there are some people that will have to come back. Restaurants, right? That's never going to be remote. Transportation, not going to be remote. But for the most part, if they're doing remote, they're still not really acknowledging that it's a different effort, that there's more on the employers because when an employee shows up to work here, they have so much outside of the screen that is affecting who they are. And they've lost that connection to the other employee that they sat next to. They've lost the connection to the office environment, right? So there is a lot more effort required to keep employees engaged as a part of a team and to help them continue to identify as an employee in your firm, right? Walking into the office, going to meetings, going to networking events, and representing that company gave them a sense of a part of their identity as belonging to the company, as being a part of the company, not belonging in a bad way, but I'm excited to be a part of this team, right? And the amount of effort it takes for a boss to make sure that that person, one, is doing their job. Sure, that's a different management style too, but it's also, do they feel like they're connected to the other members in their team? Do they feel like they are in any way invested in this company and its mission and a part of that identity? And the lack of effort on employers' parts to make sure that as a boss they're showing up for the team in all those ways, it hasn't really been effective, and it certainly has been damaging. And I think it's because of that isolation and that pullback of identity from the company, pullback of identity as belonging to a team, that it is making it easier to step into the Great Resignation. And so, I'm giving a talk in just a couple of weeks again on the same masterclass that I created 2 years ago, because it still is something that bosses and business owners are trying to learn and understand. How do I help my team be effective and still feel a part of our community and still feel like they are, a valued member? There's a lot to it, and it's different than how business has been done in the past. And I think of all the mistakes that we've made is really, we have not, as employers, stepped into that enough.
Okay, so if you were to, let's say, summarize what we have learned in a year and a half, what are like quick, short 3 lessons?
Wow. Okay. So the 3 lessons we have learned in 2 years is that the infrastructure of school is a requirement for a successful economy. End of story. Full stop. That's one lesson. The second lesson is that we need to understand that there's a mental health issue going on, and people are evaluating the quality of their life as well as how much they acquire. And that's going to make a decision for employers. So I think that's the second thing that we've learned. And the third thing is that, yes, businesses will have to change. Not all of them can. And so how do we continue to make people feel valued and attract the right talent with regard to the opportunities we have for building the right team that will serve our mission and our clients?
Taryn, your top 3 lessons?
I have 4 actually. I prepared 4, but anyway,
Okay.
I will.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
So the first thing is, as a business leader, we need to rethink the employee experience. We need to rethink what is the almost non-spoken contract between an employer and an employee, and what we are demanding of the employee. The second thing is, well, all the studies have shown that leadership skills are sorely lacking in leaders, something like between 80 and 90%. One of the things that we need to rethink as leaders is, what does leadership mean? Because leaders have always acted as the sage on the stage. I am the expert. I know what's happening. I'll tell you what to do. With the pandemic, we don't actually know what's happening, and we don't actually know what's the right thing to do for business going forward from this point in time. So the leaders now need to be what we call an intelligent fool. I don't know what's happening, but I trust my experience. I trust my intelligence. I trust I will be able to ask the right questions and form insight on the fly. And that is something that will need the group to work together and not just the superhero leader to be there and solve all the problems. That's not going to happen anymore moving forward. The third thing is health. I remarked to Tama that for the first time in my life, I actually, when I wish people, like, I hope you stay healthy, I mean it. And that physical and mental health is now being put in a spotlight that it never was before. I mean, when was the last time that you went into the office and had to think, will I be safe in the office from a infectious disease? So that's come to the forefront. And the new contract on physical and mental health will make or break the trust and relationship between an employer and an employee. And if an employer is not willing, and in the past they have never been willing to take on that physical and mental health responsibility, the employees are no longer going to trust them. And actually, McKinsey's studies have also shown the markets don't trust you, the consumers won't trust you, the suppliers won't trust you. But anyway, and the last thing is, we now need to prepare for a hybrid world that is very different from what it was before. The fact that Facebook changed its name tells us something, right? In this point in time, we are preparing for a metaverse, and your employees all need to be reskilled.
Thank you. Actually, you touched upon something that I was going to ask next. So we'll continue your thoughts on the same lines. When the pandemic started, right? Great Resignation is either, pandemic was a catalyst or it was the root cause. We still don't know yet. Was it some phenomenon happening and then pandemic kind of accelerated it? We don't know, right? There's no scientific evidence to prove that, but it is definitely a catalyst. So when the pandemic started, when the Great Resignation started happening, the thought process was, it's a 2 weeks to slow the spread and 2 weeks to control the virus. We're going to get out of it in a month or so. But now that the narrative or the thought process has changed, we are not going to get rid of pandemic. We are going to live with the virus, or at least in the near foreseeable future, right? So what, in that scenario, I think you touched upon the hybrid. In that scenario, now that we have to live with this, the Great Resignations are happening. In terms of preparedness, right? I think Monica, along the same lines, asked the same questions. In terms of preparedness, how do you kind of address the concerns if employees have to return to workspace, or kind of, counterbalance their efficiency or productivity working from home? So primarily preparedness for the future, if you want to think about, just 30 seconds or 1 minute thought.
So in answer to Monica, I will tell you quite bluntly that employers are going to have to find a way for employees to be able to perform at home, because otherwise you are going to have difficulty getting them. They have found out that many jobs can be done at home, and I feel that many of your best employees, or many of the more talented ones, will no longer take no for an answer. So that's something you would have to consider as an employer. Now, in terms of what should we do going forward, let me put it this way. In the States, you survived 9/11. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are old enough to remember it, and then to remember the 10 years after 9/11. Think of the changes in the travel industry that has happened in that 10 years. Now, what I'm going to tell you is this. For the next 10 years after this COVID, that level of change is going to occur, not just in one industry, but in every industry across the world. Now, if that is what's going to happen, because quite bluntly, let me put it this way. What's the impact of 9/11 compared to the impact of the COVID? think about what is going to be your new employer offering for your employees. Because if you're not rethinking it, then you will not be there in the future.
Thank you. Talmar?
And I know we're up against the end, and the only thing that I do want to, if I can, just in 30 seconds quick, is this is where Serena and I differ a little bit. I do believe that employers can set expectations and understand how their business best serves their clients and define the needs through very structured roles and just communicate that. And when you're working with a community that has to shift back from working in a remote space into a come into space, one, you need to have a reckoning about whether you really need to do that, because if they are productive where they are working, then really you have to sit down with yourself and really understand why you're requiring them. If it's a trust issue, maybe you don't have the right team around you anyway, but if they're performing, then you don't actually need to have them there. If the clients are happy, if the business is being served. But I do think that there will be enough companies that will want people to come back, and that there is a way to have a conversation and prepare the team that this is going to be a choice they're going to have to make. And it's okay to choose not to work for us. But if you're going to work for us in this particular role, this is how it's required. This is where we require it to be. This is what we've done to protect you. This is what we're willing to do to make you safe. But it will still have to be a choice. And I think that you will still be able to find people that will work outside of the office. I don't know if it's the people that you're working with right now that have gone to remote, but I think that there will be enough companies that will need to require people to come into an office environment or to work outside of the home, that I don't see all of the businesses going all remote. And honestly, the community side of it, there's plenty of employees that are desperate to get back to a place where they are in a physical representation, where they see that community and they are a part of that team, and that they actually very much miss it and feel isolated. So I think that there is a labor force that wants to be in an office or, the right setting with everyone. So I don't see us all going remote. I don't.
No, I agree. Partly it depends on the labor mix and the type of job. And we have, certain contracts where throughout the pandemic, all employees in those contracts were 100% on site. Because you can repair a helicopter sitting at your home.
No, you cannot.
Right? So
Yeah.
those are the kind of jobs where you are doing.
Yeah, you can't pick up,
on-site,
you can't
right?
drive a
So-
roll-off truck. Yeah.
And then there are some people who their work environment, office colleagues and all that is a very much part of their life. And
Yeah.
they certainly miss that part, and they are itching to go back into the office environment.
I agree.
So
I
it's a
think
balance.
people are tribal. We want to be with each other. We want to feel like we're building something together. We're serving our clients together. And I think that is building into the mental health issue. Actually, I think a lot of remote work that could go back actually is creating more on top of that stress and that production disconnect. I just think it's an issue.
Yeah,
just
so
wanted
I
to
got
add,
1 minute,
no,
one
I just
last
wanted to add
question,
that,
right? One last question I want to ask.
Balaji,
Yes.
can you hear me? Yeah, so I just wanted to add that I don't mean to say that all people will work remotely all the time, and that's not ever going to be happening.
Absolutely.
But what we are seeing is that most people, 90% of people want to work at least one day. And the bulk of them want to work 2 to 3 days at home, 2 to 3 days in the office and 2 to 3 days at home. That's the bulk of the people. And so, I mean, for an employer, offering the ability to work at home is going to be a big differentiating factor going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, things that can be done remotely, absolutely, yes, right? So one last question, 30 seconds. We are running against the clock right here. If you add the ears of the CEOs of large corporations or the lawmaker or even the president of the United States, what would your message be to them?
With regard to the whole,
With regard to handling, yes.
Yeah, I'm like, it's a big thing.
No, I want to scope it
yeah.
out within the Great Resignation
I was like,
topic,
that's the last question.
right?
Thanks, Baji.
Right, because one thing, let me clarify, right? Because the workforce, the Great Resignation overall, if you think about it, they are fundamentally driven by 2 factors. One is the decisions made by the employer, and the
Mhm.
decisions made by the government. So
Mhm.
those two decisions invariably affect the whole Great Resignation parameters, if you think about it. So
Absolutely.
given that scope or boundaries, what would be your message to the decision makers in
Governments.
the government
Yeah.
or the business?
I just think it has to be mental health, as Serene has discussed many times, and I agree 100%. The mental health has to start being acknowledged as a part of the human condition and therefore an employer need, and it has to be recognized as something that we consider, plan for, and compensate around.
Thank you. And Serene, what would your message be?
Or for CEOs, I will say, sit down with your team, dream of what the future is going to be like, and then redesign your employee value proposition. Redesign it. It needs to be redesigned, and it needs to be redesigned now. For government, I will say this, which is we have had health and safety, physical health and safety regulations for years and years. I think it is time to look at psychological health and safety regulations for all industries.
Thank you. And we are actually over 1 minute. I think we did a pretty good job on keeping to the schedule here. I appreciate all the insights and great questions from the attendees as well. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot from the panelists and the attendees. So appreciate everybody's inputs. Going back to Rena or Cindy, do you have any closing thoughts before we
Oh.
call this a wrap?
Can we answer this one question from Monica? She asked, how do you address concerns when you want employees to return to the workspace and they counter that they have been efficient at home?
Yeah, I believe we addressed that, but
Oh, you addressed that?
yeah,
Okay.
we did address that. But
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
one special shout out to Serene. I was looking for the moment when you are going to fall off the chair sleeping, because it's 2 a.m. your time.
No, it's because I have a very good moderator and fellow panelists. So I thank you, Balaji and Tama, right? I mean, you really kept me engaged.
Okay. Thank you, and special, kudos to you for that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Balaji, for being an awesome moderator, and Serene and Tharma. It's just extremely educational, and I believe everyone's so impressed. And there's so much information you guys delivered today, and we will amplify the message after the events because we record the video. I think let me actually just briefly mention a few upcoming events. Lunch with leaders next Tuesday. And we're showcasing for members at next Friday's member showcase. And welcome to invite prospective members to learn about chamber events at our member orientation. So I believe everyone just learned so much, and we have 2 more sessions upcoming. February 10th about acquire the competencies, and March 2nd, workplace mental health. And this is the signature event Chamber is hosting, Jewels of Asia Gala, May the 28th at the Live Casino and the Hotel, our title sponsor. So we're looking for nominations. Feel free to nominate deserving business to this award program. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful year ahead, and look forward to seeing everyone next session.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you,
Cindy.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Cindy.
weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks to all of you. Bye.